Your mind wants answers the way a frightened body wants shelter. Not because answers are always useful, but because uncertainty feels threatening when you don't trust yourself to move without guarantees. So the mind starts spinning, thinking, analyzing, simulating futures, replaying conversations, running scenarios that never actually happen. It convinces you that if you can just understand enough, predict enough, prepare enough, then you'll finally feel safe to move. But that safety never comes. Overthinking is not intelligence at work. It's fear wearing the mask of logic. It's the nervous system trying to create certainty in a world that doesn't offer it. And the more you demand certainty before acting, the more stuck you become. Because life does not move at the speed of thought. It moves at the speed of decision. The trap is subtle. You tell yourself you're being responsible, careful, thoughtful. But beneath that is avoidance. Not of danger, of discomfort, of the feeling of not knowing, of the vulnerability of choosing without guarantees. Excessive analysis becomes a way to delay exposure to uncertainty, even as it quietly drains your energy. You feel busy, but nothing changes. You feel engaged, but nothing moves. You feel informed, but not alive. This is the quiet exhaustion of constant mental simulation. Your body lives in the present, but your mind is stuck in imagined futures. And because those futures are hypothetical, they can never be resolved. So the loop continues. The irony is that clarity almost never comes from thinking harder. It comes from contact, from movement, from doing something real and letting reality respond. Thinking creates models. Action creates feedback. And feedback is what the brain actually needs to adjust. But overthinking avoids feedback. It prefers internal rehearsal because rehearsal feels safer than performance. Inside your head, you can pause, rewind, and control the narrative. In real life, you can't. So the mind stays where it feels powerful, even if that power is an illusion. At the root of this is the need for control. The brain mistakes control for safety. If it can predict what's coming, it believes it can protect you from pain. But most anxiety doesn't come from what actually happens. It comes from trying to mentally control outcomes you haven't lived yet. The future becomes a mental project, something to manage in advance. And the more unpredictable life feels, the more the mind tightens its grip. This is where anxiety grows. Uncertainty doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it threatens identity. If you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know who you'll be in that future. Will you succeed? Fail? Be respected? Be okay? The mind tries to answer these questions preemptively because not knowing feels like standing on unstable ground. But here's the paradox. The harder you try to control mentally, the less clarity you actually have. Control narrows perception. It locks you into a single imagined path and filters out alternatives. Letting go of control doesn't make you careless, it makes you receptive. When you stop trying to force answers, your nervous system begins to relax. Not because everything is solved, but because it's no longer fighting reality. And in that relaxation, perception widens. You see more options. You notice information you were too tense to register before. Clarity returns, not as certainty about the future, but as confidence in your ability to respond. This is why clarity is a byproduct of action, not thought. The brain is designed to learn through movement. Decision-based clarity comes after you take a step, not before. Neuroscience shows that confidence follows commitment. When you act, even imperfectly, the brain updates its model based on real-world feedback. Waiting to feel ready keeps you trapped in abstraction. Feeling ready is not a prerequisite. It's a result. There's a difference between thoughtful action and mental paralysis. Thoughtful action acknowledges uncertainty, but moves anyway. Paralysis demands resolution before movement. And because resolution is impossible without movement, nothing happens. This is why so many people feel like they're waiting for clarity, when they're actually waiting for permission to avoid risk. But life doesn't offer permission slips. It offers moments that require response. This is where trust comes in. Trust is not blind optimism. It's the psychological strength to move without full understanding. It's the willingness to act based on what you know now, not what you wish you could know. When you stop demanding answers, your nervous system stops bracing for threat. You're no longer trying to solve life. You're engaging with it. Acting from intuition doesn't mean acting impulsively. It means listening to signals that don't come from fear. Signals that feel calm, grounded, and quietly insistent. Intuition doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It doesn't need to convince you. It simply points. Fear demands explanation. Intuition asks for trust. And when you act from that place, even small actions carry alignment. You may not understand the full picture, but you understand the next step. And that's all life ever asks for. The present moment is the only problem you're actually asked to solve. The mind jumps ahead because it wants to finish the story. It wants closure. But most of the problems it tries to solve don't exist yet. They're projections, possibilities, imagined complications. Solving them in advance doesn't protect you. It exhausts you. Presence simplifies everything. When you bring attention back to what's actually happening, decisions shrink to manageable size. You stop trying to live the whole future at once. You focus on the next honest move, the next conversation, the next boundary, the next action that feels true. Life doesn't require a master plan. It requires participation. And participation becomes easier when you release the need to be right. Overthinking is fueled by ego, by the fear of making the wrong choice, by the belief that mistakes are permanent. But growth requires permission to be imperfect. Every meaningful path includes missteps. They're not evidence of failure. They're evidence of engagement. When being right stops mattering, progress becomes inevitable. You stop optimizing for image and start optimizing for experience. You allow yourself to learn in real time instead of demanding flawless execution. This is the identity release that ends overthinking. You no longer need to protect a fragile self-concept. You don't need every choice to validate your worth. You let life shape you instead of trying to outthink it. And then, something shifts. You move from observer to participant, from watching your life to living it, from analyzing experience to having it. Life begins to reveal itself not through answers, but through consequences, through feedback, through lived moments that teach you more than any amount of mental rehearsal ever could. This is not recklessness, it's engagement. And engagement changes everything. You realize that life was never meant to be figured out. It was meant to be lived, one honest step at a time. Not with certainty, but with presence. Not with control, but with trust. Not from the head alone, but from the whole system moving together. The invitation isn't to stop thinking. It's to stop hiding inside thought. Because the moment you step out of your head and into your experience, life starts moving again. At some point, overthinking stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like a cage. Not suddenly, quietly. You don't wake up one day and decide you're trapped. You just notice that despite all the thinking, planning, rehearsing, and analyzing, your life hasn't actually moved. You've been busy in your head, but stagnant in reality. That's when the exhaustion sets in. Not physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion. The kind that comes from carrying too many imaginary futures at once, from trying to solve problems that don't exist yet, from replaying decisions you haven't made and consequences you haven't lived. Your mind becomes crowded with what-ifs, and your nervous system never gets the signal that it's safe to rest. Because safety, in your mind, has become conditional. I'll relax when I know. I'll move when I'm sure. I'll act when I understand. But understanding never feels complete enough. There's always one more angle, one more possibility, one more scenario to consider. And so you wait. Not because you're incapable, but because you've been taught that certainty should come before movement. That belief is the real trap. Life doesn't reward certainty. It responds to engagement. It answers movement, not contemplation. And when movement is withheld, life doesn't punish you. It simply stays quiet. That silence is often mistaken for confusion, when it's actually an invitation. An invitation to stop standing outside your life, analyzing it like a puzzle, and step back into it as a participant. The moment you stop demanding guarantees, something subtle shifts in your system. The nervous system, which has been locked in vigilance mode, begins to soften. Not because risk disappears, but because you're no longer fighting reality. You're no longer insisting that life explain itself before you're willing to show up. That insistence was costing you more than you realized. Every time you overthink, you delay feedback. And without feedback, the mind can't update. It keeps recycling the same fears, the same assumptions, the same outdated self-image. Action interrupts that loop, even imperfect action, especially imperfect action. This is why people often feel clearer after they act, even if the outcome isn't perfect. The clarity doesn't come from success, it comes from contact, from real data replacing imagined outcomes. Imagined futures are always more threatening than lived moments. When you finally move, you realize something important. Most of what you feared was exaggerated. Not because challenges don't exist, but because fear multiplies them in the abstract. Reality, when met directly, is usually more manageable than the mind predicts. And once you experience that a few times, trust begins to replace overanalysis. Trust doesn't mean believing everything will work out. It means believing you can respond to whatever happens. That shift is profound. It takes pressure off the future and returns power to the present. You no longer need to solve your entire life. You only need to meet what's in front of you honestly. That's when decisions become simpler. Not easier. Simpler. You stop asking, what's the perfect choice? And start asking, what's the next truthful step? Truthful doesn't mean comfortable. It means aligned. It means the step that reduces inner conflict rather than increases it. The step that doesn't require you to lie to yourself. The step that feels steady, even if it's uncertain. When you act from that place, the mind quiets naturally. Not because it has answers, but because it's no longer being used as a shield against living. Thought returns to its proper role, a tool, not a refuge. This is where many people notice that their identity begins to loosen. The need to be right fades. The fear of choosing wrong loses its grip. You realize that no single decision defines you as much as your willingness to respond and adjust. Growth stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like a process. And processes allow for mistakes. When you release the demand for perfection, momentum becomes inevitable. Progress doesn't require confidence. It creates it. Each step taken reinforces a new internal message. I can handle this. That message is far more stabilizing than any amount of pre-planning ever was. Overthinking collapses when self-trust grows. Because the real reason you overthink isn't intelligence. It's doubt. Doubt in your ability to respond, adapt, recover. When that doubt softens, the mind no longer needs to run endless simulations. It doesn't need to predict everything because it trusts the system. You. This is why participation changes everything. When you're participating, you're alive in the moment. You're no longer standing outside your experience, commenting on it. You're inside it, responding to it. Life becomes something you're in conversation with, not something you're trying to solve from a distance. And life responds to that. Not with instant clarity, but with direction, with feedback, with signals you can only receive once you're moving. Paths don't reveal themselves to observers. They reveal themselves to walkers. This is why so many people feel stuck while waiting for certainty. They're waiting for a map that only appears after the journey begins. Once you accept that, something liberating happens. You stop treating life like a test you're afraid to fail. You stop treating decisions like verdicts on your worth. You stop demanding that the future justify itself in advance. You begin to live experimentally. Curious, responsive, present, and paradoxically, that's when things start to make sense. Not in the form of grand revelations, but through alignment, through a feeling that your actions and your values are no longer at odds, through a sense that even when things are uncertain, you're no longer divided internally. That division was the real source of anxiety, not the unknown, not the future, but the refusal to move without certainty. When that refusal dissolves, energy returns, creativity returns, presence returns. You feel more like yourself, not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer hiding. And this is the quiet truth most people never hear. You were never meant to figure life out before living it. You were meant to live it and let understanding follow. One honest step at a time. One decision grounded in truth, not fear. One moment fully met instead of endlessly analyzed. That's not recklessness. That's maturity. And once you step into that way of living, overthinking loses its power. Not because you defeated it, but because you no longer need it. Life moves again, and so do you.